The storm on Interstate 40. My name is Megan Torres. I'm 29 years old, and I'm a freelance graphic designer based in Austin, Texas. And I almost didn't survive the drive home on a Thursday evening in August. That night, I learned that sometimes the safest place isn't as safe as you think it is. Before I begin, if you're driving in a thunderstorm right now, maybe pull over somewhere safe. Keep listening, because what happened to me on that stretch of highway changed everything I thought I knew about asking for help. It started like any other workday. I'd spent the entire afternoon in my home office working on a website redesign for a tech startup. The weather had been clear all morning. Blue sky, sunshine, the kind of August heat that made you want to stay inside with the air conditioning cranked up. But by 5 o'clock, clouds started rolling in from the west. Dark clouds, the kind that move fast and look heavy with water. The weather app on my phone showed a thunderstorm warning for the area. Heavy rain expected. Possible hail. Wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour. I decided to leave early. I didn't want to be driving in the worst of it. I packed up my laptop and my bag. I said goodbye to my apartment. I grabbed my keys and headed down to the parking garage where my car was waiting. A white Honda Civic. Nothing fancy, but it was reliable and it handled well. I'd bought it 3 years ago and I'd driven it through 2 Texas summers without any major issues. I got in, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking garage. The sky was getting darker by the minute. The wind was picking up. I could feel it pushing against my car as I merged onto Interstate 40, heading east toward my parents' house, where I was planning to spend the evening. For the first 30 minutes, the drive was fine. A little windy, some light rain, nothing that made me concerned. But then things changed. The rain got heavier. Not just regular heavy rain, but the kind of rain that makes it hard to see more than a few car lengths ahead. The kind of rain that sounds like someone is throwing buckets of water at your windshield. My wipers were on their highest setting, but they were barely keeping up. I slowed down to 30 miles per hour on a highway where the speed limit was 70. I was one of maybe 4 cars on the road at this point. Everyone else had either pulled over or gotten off at earlier exits. Then the lightning started. It wasn't in the distance. It was right there, above me, around me. One moment the highway was dark and wet, and the next it was illuminated in a blinding white light. The boom of thunder came so fast after the lightning that I knew the storm was directly overhead. The sound was incredible. It wasn't just a sound. It was a physical force. It vibrated through my car. It made my chest feel tight. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I told myself it was okay. Lightning rarely hit moving vehicles. The rubber tires would protect me. I just needed to keep driving. Just needed to get to my parents' house. But then another bolt came. This one hit so close I felt my car lurch slightly. My heart jumped into my throat. I wasn't sure if the car had been struck or if the electrical charge from a nearby strike had affected it somehow. Either way, I made a decision. I couldn't keep driving. It wasn't safe. I needed to pull over and wait out the storm. So I slowed down further and carefully moved toward the shoulder of the highway. I checked my mirrors to make sure no one was coming up behind me. The road behind me was empty, just dark and wet and endless. I pulled onto the shoulder, carefully positioning my car so it was as far from the traffic lanes as possible, and I stopped. The rain continued to hammer down. The wind continued to blow. But at least I was stopped. At least I wasn't moving at 70 miles per hour in conditions where I could barely see. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, just breathing, just watching the lightning flash across the sky and counting the seconds until the thunder. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, boom, 3 miles away. Then 2 miles, then 1 mile. The storm was right on top of me. My phone battery was at 47%. I didn't want to drain it too fast, but I also didn't want to sit in silence with just my thoughts and the sound of the rain and the thunder. So I opened my email to check if there was anything urgent from clients. There was nothing. I had a few messages from friends in a group chat, but nothing that needed an immediate response. I closed the email and opened my location. My parents' house was still 17 miles away. On a good day, that was a 20-minute drive. In this storm, it would be much longer. I decided to call my mom, just to let her know I was stuck on the side of the highway, but that I was safe. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. She asked where I was. I told her I was on Interstate 40 pulled over waiting out the storm. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. She said she'd heard on the news that there had been an accident on Interstate 40 about 10 miles south of where I was. Multiple vehicle pileup. Something about a driver who had hit black ice or lost control or something. The highway was backing up. Traffic was being diverted. The news was recommending that people avoid the area if possible. I told her I was stopped and safe. I said I'd wait until the storm passed, and then I'd drive carefully. She said, okay, but that she was worried. She said to call her back when I started driving again. I said I would. We hung up. I sat in my car and listened to the rain and the thunder and thought about the accident 10 miles away. About people who hadn't decided to pull over. About people who'd kept driving in conditions like this and paid the price. After about 20 minutes, the worst of the storm seemed to be passing. The lightning was still coming, but it was further away now. The rain was still heavy, but not quite as torrential. I thought about starting the car and continuing to my parents' house. It would be slow, but at least I could move. At least I wouldn't be stuck on the side of the highway for another hour. But something held me back. Some instinct. Some feeling that told me it was too soon. That the storm wasn't actually passing. That there was more coming. I was right. About 5 minutes later, the rain came back heavier than before. It was like someone had turned a faucet on in the sky. The visibility went from maybe 100 feet back down to 30. The lightning started again, bright and close and terrifying. I gripped the steering wheel and decided I was staying put. I wasn't going anywhere until this was over. I'd call my mom back later. I'd explain that I was safe and that I'd be there when I could. And that's when I noticed the car. It had pulled up behind me, about 100 feet back, close enough that I could see its headlights in my rearview mirror, but far enough away that I couldn't make out the details. It was dark-colored, maybe black or dark blue. It was parked on the shoulder of the highway just like I was. Just like someone else had decided to pull over and wait out the storm. Except something about the way it was parked felt deliberate. Something about it felt like it was watching me. I told myself I was being paranoid. Someone had just decided to stop, just like I had. The storm was fierce. Lots of people would be pulling over. But I kept watching the car in my mirror. Kept waiting to see if the driver would get out. Kept waiting to see if someone would approach my car. No one did. The car just sat there. The headlights stayed on. The engine, I assumed, was running, and the driver stayed inside. I turned my attention back to the storm. I watched the lightning. I counted the seconds to the thunder. I tried to distract myself with my phone. I opened social media. I scrolled through posts about the weather, about people complaining about the storm, about people sharing videos of the lightning. I spent maybe 15 minutes doing this. When I looked back at the mirror, the car was still there. That's when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. A voice came through. Male. Official sounding. He identified himself as a state trooper. He said he was calling because my car had been reported as abandoned on the side of Interstate 40. He wanted to check on my welfare and make sure everything was okay. I told him I was fine. I told him I was just waiting out the storm. I told him I'd be on my way as soon as the weather cleared up. He said that made sense. He said there had been reports of an accident further down the highway, and that he was just making sure people pulled over were safe. He asked if I needed any assistance. I said no, I was fine. I'd be on my way soon. He said okay, and that he'd be in the area if I needed anything. He gave me a reference number and said I could call back if I had any issues. Then he hung up. I felt slightly better, knowing that someone official knew I was here, knowing that a state trooper was aware of my location. It made me feel less alone. It made me feel safer. I looked back at the mirror. The car was still there. Same position, same headlights. But now I thought maybe it was another driver who had also pulled over. Maybe it was someone like me. Someone waiting out the storm. But then the car moved. Slowly. Carefully. It pulled back onto the highway. I watched it accelerate, slowly moving away from me, heading north on Interstate 40. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The car was leaving. The situation that had made me uncomfortable was resolving itself. The driver was continuing on. I was alone again on the side of the highway, except I wasn't alone. Because about 30 seconds after the first car disappeared into the rain, another car pulled up behind me. Also dark-colored. Also parking on the shoulder, about 100 feet back. Also with its headlights on. Also with the engine running. This car, though, looked slightly different from the first one. It looked bigger. It looked like a truck, maybe. But in the darkness and the rain, I couldn't be sure. I couldn't make out details. My heart rate increased. 2 cars. 2 separate drivers deciding to pull over in the exact same spot behind me. That seemed like too much of a coincidence. I decided to call my mom back. I needed to hear a familiar voice. I needed to tell someone where I was and what was happening. The phone rang. She picked up immediately. She asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, just still waiting out the storm. I didn't mention the cars. I didn't want to worry her. I just wanted to stay on the phone with her, to hear her voice while I waited. We talked for about 5 minutes. She told me about her day, about what she was making for dinner, about what my dad was watching on TV. Normal things. Things that had nothing to do with storms or cars on the side of highways. It was comforting. It was grounding. And then my mom said something that made my blood go cold. She said, "Wait, honey. Turn on the news. They're talking about something strange happening on Interstate 40. I opened my news app. I saw it immediately. A breaking news alert about Interstate 40. But not about the accident she'd mentioned earlier. This was something new. Something different. A news station was reporting that there had been several car break-ins and attempted break-ins on the side of Interstate 40 in the past hour. All of them in the area where the thunderstorm was at its worst. All of them during the weather event. People who had pulled over to wait out the storm were being targeted. Robbed. Some had been assaulted. The news was recommending that anyone stranded on the highway stay in their vehicles and call 911 if they saw any suspicious activity. My hand started shaking. I looked back at the mirror. The truck was still there, still parked, still watching. Or at least that's how it felt. I decided I needed to call the police. I needed to report the truck. I needed to tell them exactly where I was and what was happening. I hung up with my mom and dialed 911. The operator answered on the first ring. She asked what my emergency was. I told her I was stranded on Interstate 40 during the thunderstorm, and that there was a suspicious vehicle parked behind me. I told her about the first car that had left, and the second truck that had pulled up in its place. The operator asked for my exact location. I looked at my odometer and the mile markers on the side of the highway. I told her I was approximately 3 miles north of the exit for Onion Creek and about 7 miles south of the exit for Riverside Drive. The operator said she was dispatching a trooper to my location. She said it would take about 8 to 10 minutes for them to arrive given the weather and traffic conditions. She said I should stay in my vehicle and keep my doors locked. She said if the truck approached my car, or if anyone tried to open my door, I should honk the horn and attempt to drive away. She said the trooper would be there soon. I hung up and immediately locked all my doors. I checked that the windows were closed. I adjusted my mirror to get a better look at the truck behind me. The driver was still inside, still not moving, still watching. At least that's what it felt like. The lightning continued to flash. The rain continued to fall. The thunder continued to shake my car. 5 minutes passed. No trooper. I called 911 back. The same operator answered. She said the trooper was about 3 minutes away. She said traffic was heavy due to the accident further up the highway. She said to stay calm and stay in my car. I said, okay. We stayed on the line. She didn't hang up. She just stayed there breathing on the other end of the line, present, keeping me company. It was a small thing, but it meant a lot. Then she said something that made me freeze. She said, Ms. Torres, do not open your car door under any circumstances. Do not roll down your window. Do not engage with anyone outside your vehicle. Can you confirm you understand? Her tone had changed. It had become more serious, more urgent. I asked her why. I asked her what was going on. She said there had been a development. She said the trooper who was heading to my location had found something. She said to just trust her and to stay in the car no matter what happened. She said the trooper would explain everything when he arrived. I said okay, but fear was crawling up my spine. What development? What had they found? I looked back at the mirror. The truck was still there, but now something looked different about it. The headlights seemed brighter. They seemed to be moving. No, not moving. They were just getting closer. The truck was moving forward, slowly, deliberately. It was driving toward me. My breathing became faster. My hand started to shake. The truck was approaching my vehicle. I could see it more clearly now. It was a dark pickup truck, maybe a Ford or a Chevy. There was someone in the driver's seat, a figure. I couldn't make out facial features, but I could see the silhouette, the shape of a head, the outline of shoulders. The truck continued forward. It was now maybe 40 feet behind me. 30 feet. 20 feet. I honked my horn. Long. Loud. One continuous blast. The truck stopped. It paused. It sat there idling about 15 feet behind me. The operator on the phone was asking if I was okay. I said no. I said the truck was approaching my car. I said I was scared. The operator said a trooper was less than a minute away. She said to just hold on. She said everything would be okay. And then the truck started moving again. But it wasn't moving toward me. It was moving around me. It was shifting lanes. It was pulling onto the highway. It was accelerating. It was driving away from me, moving north on Interstate 40, disappearing into the rain and the darkness and the lightning. Within seconds, it was gone. I could only see its taillights growing smaller and smaller, and then disappearing completely. I sat there breathing hard, my chest heaving, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The operator was still on the line, asking if I was okay, asking if the truck had done anything, asking what it looked like. I told her everything. I described the truck. I told her about how it had approached and then left. She said she was relaying the information to the trooper. She said he was almost at my location, and then I saw the trooper. Red and blue lights cutting through the rain and the darkness. A state police cruiser pulling up in front of my car, parking strategically between me and the direction the truck had gone. The trooper got out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the campaign hat and uniform of the Texas State Police. He approached my window carefully. I rolled it down slightly, keeping it only open enough to talk. He asked if I was okay. I said yes. He said there had been a series of crimes in the area, and that they were taking them seriously. He said to stay put while he did a quick check of the area. He walked around my car looking at the ground, looking at my vehicle, checking for any signs of attempted break-in or vandalism. There was nothing. No scratches, no fingerprints on the windows, no signs that anyone had actually tried to get into my car. The trooper came back to my window. He said the area seemed clear now. He said the trooper behind me would stay here for another 30 minutes to monitor the area. He said I could continue driving if I felt safe to do so, or I could wait until the storm completely passed. I asked him about the truck. I asked him if they'd seen it. He said they'd been looking for it. He said they'd seen it on the highway, but it had exited at the next interchange. He said the vehicle description matched one they were looking for in connection with several incidents. I told him I wanted to stay put for a while longer. The storm was still raging. I didn't feel safe driving yet. He said that was fine. He said he'd have a unit in the area for the rest of the night. He said I was safe. I said, okay. He left. He drove back to the position ahead of me, his light still flashing, a constant reminder that he was there, that he was watching, that I wasn't alone. I sat in my car for another hour. Slowly, the storm began to ease. The rain stopped being torrential. It became just heavy. The lightning became less frequent. It moved further away. The thunder became quieter. Slowly, the weather conditions improved. Slowly, I felt safe enough to drive. I called my mom back. I told her what had happened. She was horrified. She told me to be careful on the roads. She told me to call her when I got to their house. I said I would. I started my car. I carefully merged back onto the highway. I drove slowly but steadily toward my parents' house. The trooper's lights followed me for about 5 miles, making sure I was okay, making sure no one else approached me. Then the trooper turned off the highway at an exit, and I was alone again. Just me and the wet road stretching out ahead of me. I made it to my parents' house without incident. I called my mom as soon as I pulled into their driveway. She came rushing out of the house. She hugged me. She didn't let go for a long time. We went inside. My dad was waiting. He hugged me too. They made me sit down. They made me drink water. They let me process what had happened. The next day I did some research. I looked up the news reports about the crimes on Interstate 40. There were 5 documented incidents that night. 5 people who had pulled over to wait out the storm. 5 people who had been targeted. 3 of them had not stayed in their vehicles. 3 of them had gotten out to look around or to stretch their legs or for some other reason. 2 of them had been attacked. 1 had been robbed at knife point. The other had escaped. 2 people had stayed in their vehicles like I had. They were not harmed. Their cars had been approached, but the perpetrators had moved on when they saw the person inside was prepared to defend themselves. The police eventually caught the person responsible. It was a man in his 40s. He had a history of violent crime. He had targeted drivers on the highway during storms, specifically because the conditions made it harder for people to see, harder for emergency services to respond quickly, and harder for victims to get away. He targeted people who had pulled over. He knew they were stationary. He knew they felt trapped. The trooper who had responded to my call came to my parents' house. He wanted to make sure I was okay. He wanted to tell me something about that night. He said something that I've never forgotten. He said that when the 911 operator had heard about the crimes happening on Interstate 40, she had told the responding troopers to tell anyone stranded in that area to under no circumstances open their doors or windows, because that was the perpetrator's method. He would approach vehicles during the storm. He would try the door handles. If a door was unlocked, he would open it. If someone rolled down a window to talk to him, he would use that as an opportunity to reach in. The trooper said I had done everything right. I had called for help. I had stayed in my vehicle. I had locked my doors. I had not engaged with anyone suspicious. I had followed the operator's instructions. And because I had done those things, I was safe. The truck that had approached my car was likely the perpetrator. He had approached probably to check if my door was unlocked. And when he saw I was alert and aware, and didn't appear to be a vulnerable victim, he had moved on to look for someone else. I asked the trooper if he could tell me what the man had planned to do if I had been a different kind of person. If I had been someone who rolled down their window, or who opened their door. The trooper said he didn't want to talk about that. He said it was enough that I was okay. But I've spent the last 3 years thinking about it. I've spent the last 3 years understanding that there was a moment on that stretch of highway when my life could have gone a completely different direction. When a choice I made, or a choice someone else made, or just luck could have changed everything. I could have been victim number 3 that night. I could have been attacked. I could have been hurt. I could have been killed. But I wasn't. I stayed in my car. I locked my doors. I called for help. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night. The trooper told me that the man they arrested was responsible for at least 8 previous attacks on highways. 8 that they could connect to him. 8 people he had targeted and attacked, or robbed. But he'd been doing this for years. He'd been active before that. So how many times had he approached someone? How many cars had he tried? How many people had gotten lucky like I did? How many had not? And the worst part, the thing that really haunts me, is that I learned the truth about where I thought I was safe. I thought my car was a sanctuary. I thought that If I locked my doors and stayed inside, I was protected. But I wasn't. I was just trapped. I was in a metal box on the side of a highway, and all that separated me from danger was a lock and a window. A lock that would have meant nothing if the man had had a tool to break the glass. A window that would have meant nothing if I had made the wrong decision and opened it. Now, when I drive, I always have my doors locked. I always check my mirrors. I always watch for cars that are following me. I never pull over on the side of highways anymore. I drive through storms. I drive in bad weather. I find the nearest exit and I keep going because the side of the road is no longer a place where I feel safe. It's a place where danger waits. It's a place where predators hunt. It's a place where the biggest decision you make, whether to keep your door locked or to unlock it, whether to open your window or to keep it closed, can mean the difference between surviving the night and becoming another tragic story. Every time it rains now, I think about that night. Every time the thunder rolls and the lightning flashes, I'm back on the side of Interstate 40, watching the truck approach in my mirror, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, knowing that there was danger just outside my door. And I'm grateful that I made the right choices, grateful that I stayed calm, grateful that I stayed alive. But I'm also terrified. Terrified because I know how close I came. Terrified because I know there are other people still being hunted. Terrified because I know that man is in prison. But there are other men and women just like him. Still out there, still driving highways, looking for people who make the wrong choice. So if you're ever stranded on the side of a road during a storm, remember me. Remember that the safest place isn't always as safe as you think. Remember that locked doors matter. Remember that sometimes the scariest part of a true story isn't what happens, but what could have happened. Remember that the difference between a tragedy and a survival story is often just the small choices we make in the moment. And if you ever see a dark truck approaching you on a highway, and your instinct tells you something is wrong, listen to that instinct. Lock your doors, call for help, stay in your vehicle, and don't open that door, no matter what. Because sometimes the storms we face aren't just weather. Sometimes they're the darkness that walks on two legs. And the only thing standing between you and that darkness is the choice to stay safe. I'm alive today because I made that choice. And I'll carry that night with me for the rest of my life.